Hello and welcome to Access Chat. I'm delighted that we're joined today by Joan Bohan. Joan is working for Dysnie in Paris and has been responsible for setting up the Dysnie network, focusing on helping find potential for their dyslexic employees and helping people realize their potential, because we know we have potential. So welcome, Joan. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, how you came to take this journey on, and what sparked your passion in dyslexia?
Hello, Neil. Yes, thanks for having me, and thanks for having this conversation, because I am really enthusiastic about dyslexia. But on the back of that, I am a Dysnie employee where I've worked for more than 25 years. I'm originally from Los Angeles, transplanted myself in France. I ended up settling down and having children. And one of my children is dyslexic. And I learned this early on when he was about 6 years old, the age that you are when you learn how to read. And as an American in Paris, I really struggled to get my brain around what dyslexia was. I was not at all familiar with it. And the bits and pieces that I heard were actually quite frightening. People in my entourage in France had children or acquaintances that were dyslexic. And the stories that I heard were pretty difficult to listen to. And, it's boiled down to the very strict and demanding school system, the lack of understanding on the part of everyone like that. So I really struggled with this. But, as an American, I read in English, and it's just my, natural way of reading. And I came across some pretty fantastic books in English that came out of the United States talking about dyslexia. One of those being Overcoming Dyslexia, that talked about the dyslexic brain and how it worked. Another one, Dyslexic Advantage, really focused on the strength side of dyslexia. And a couple of others, including the Dyslexia Empowerment Plan. And, I was really amazed to learn the incredible things that I know today about dyslexia, that yes, there is a challenge with reading and spelling and writing as a result, but the brain is really set up in such a way that things are processed differently. And so dyslexics think differently, which means that there are these creative minds, out of the box thinkers and problem solvers. And, I was just floored, because up until that point, I hadn't realized there were strengths. In fact, the buzz about dyslexia, I think, was rather negative and talked about and implied maybe even a subpar intelligence level. So, I was just really excited about that. And I wanted my son to be excited about that. And so I really pumped this information up into him. And, so that was kind of my backdrop. And I was like the cheerleader. I was a dyslexic cheerleader, in my household. And about 5 years ago, so coming back to that, how I got involved in this project. So about 5 years ago at Dysnie, I pitched an idea about dyslexia empowerment. Really thought this would be a great opportunity to help change the perception of dyslexia and show the positive side, but also inform people, because, as dyslexics know, people don't quite understand it. Even teachers don't necessarily know what they need to know about dyslexia. So it is pretty daunting. And, I thought if we could tell children what dyslexia was about, then when they became adults, they would be, less intimidated by that word, and maybe even be inspired by the dyslexic colleague or friend that they came across. So I went ahead and put together this proposal that really was harnessing what we did best at Dysnie. I wasn't reinventing the wheel. I mean, we did product, we had experiences, we had content, and, Dysnie was a rather engaged company with our communities anyway. So I just went ahead and plopped dyslexia in there. And really that got me started. And, I pitched the initiative to the European management team, who went ahead and gave me the green light in France and the Netherlands and Belgium. And, from there, we were able to launch product that was dyslexia friendly and content and community engagement.
That sounds great. And I am aware of the challenges for young dyslexic people in the French education system, because it is very different to the sort of Anglo-American approach to education in general, but also particularly around the approach to dyslexia and so on. And there was a distinct lack of tooling, a focus on handwriting, and all of these things that are all the things that are going to make people disengage with education. So so I'm really glad that you're cheerleading for your own son and for people with dyslexia in general. And then I'm really interested also in what the impacts have been, the positive impacts have been of your program. You know, what has it done in terms of bringing together a community of dyslexic and neurodivergent individuals? Because I'm sure that, you know, like many, dyslexia often overlaps with other neurodivergent conditions. So I'm dyslexic and ADHD, and Debra too. So has it brought more people together, and what have been some of the benefits to the organization of you doing this?
Well, you know, that's a great question, because, you know, it's like this journey has been pretty amazing, you know, in itself, to be able to bring something very personal to the company, and people see me as a mom, and, you know, as maybe a crusader in the dyslexia spot. So this was just an amazing experience. But what I found, and I was not expecting at all, is that every time I got up on my soapbox to explain what dyslexia was, and so that's what I would do. I would take my colleagues through dyslexia. This is what it is. This is why you need to know it. Did you know that dyslexics think out of the box, or creative? And so I'd be pumping all of these strengths out there, and not to mention these famous faces that are associated with dyslexia, right? You know, from the Richard Bransons, and, you know, the different celebrities that we've seen, Steven Spielberg, and many actors. I mean, in fact, all walks of life. And people in the audience that were dyslexic, who had never admitted they were dyslexic, came up to me afterward and told me that they were dyslexic. And they finally had the courage to actually say that, because they saw something that gave them a badge of honor. And I mean, this was really so heartwarming for me, because I had not expected this at all. And these weren't just anybody in the company. These were people that were part of the management team. So, you know, just was a case in point of the success factors connected with dyslexia. So that was, I'd say, one really amazing thing. And each time I spoke, you know, I'd speak in, you know, our different offices in France and the Netherlands and Belgium, and even different events that were connected to the initiative. Same thing, people coming up to me telling me they're dyslexic. And the other thing is, I think that people, you know, saw that wow, as a company, you know, we're able to take a social issue and connect it with a business. And, you know, that was another thing that was really eye-opening to me, because, you know, up until that point, it was just kind of business as usual, great business as usual. Obviously, Dysnie has really a great offering, right? But that we could actually even go further than that with our messaging and our products. And so it really got, you know, me thinking that we could actually do more than that in terms of social innovation. But other people were also sparked and came forward with ideas that were impactful. So not necessarily in the disability space, although there were some, but, you know, the more you talk about these types of initiatives, the more people start thinking. And that's frankly how I got started. I had no intention of even submitting an idea until I heard somebody talk about an idea that they had done that had impact. And I got to thinking, what could I do? What could I do? So, you know, you just take one. And so the whole speaking about these initiatives really, I think, led to this domino effect of others coming up with similar ideas. And I mean, I really do think that the perception, at least in the offices that I spoke in, has changed about dyslexia. And I think, you know, if that's the only thing that I've done, that's enough. And, you know, I think there's another point to be made on the consumer side. So in France, for example, we did a range of books with Hachette. Hachette's one of our big licensees. And we did a range of beginner books called J'apprends à lire, so I learned to read, and a special dyslexia friendly special version. And, you know, it's really easy to go to Amazon and have a look at those books and look at the comments that you're seeing from the parents. They're saying, oh, at last my child is reading, Dysnie for doing that. So you can see that the impact is far reaching, and that it also warms my heart. And we did some content, the same story, had children going on to YouTube where our content was sitting and chiming in, misspelling things, saying I'm dyslexic. So they were finally, had the courage and maybe the pride to say that they were dyslexic as well. So it's really touched a lot of areas. I'm just saying maybe the last way that we've connected with the community on this. And, these things weren't planned. And that's the other beauty of doing a project like this, is that you just kind of go with it, and then some ideas kind of crop up. I had a mother come up to me after I did a speaking engagement about it in France, about the project. And she said, can you take my son in? He's 13. He needs to do a week in a company as part of the school program, which they have to do in France. It's called the stage d'entreprise. And he says he's dyslexic and he's just so, so down, and he would love to be able to do this at Dysnie. And so I was able to talk to my HR department and get this boy in our little program. It was only open to employees at the time. I got him involved, and then that led to every year, twice a year, we have the employees of our cast members, as we call ourselves, involved in this program. But also we opened it up to the dyslexic children. And I mentioned that some executives came back to me to tell me that they were dyslexic. Well, I was able to pair them up during a little one-to-one, and so that they could not only see this great Dysnie thing that we were doing, but also to meet one of their own who was accomplished working for the Walt Disney Company. And that was something that I hadn't even planned, and boom, it just kind of took off and happened.
I think that you bring up so many good points. I want to say, you mentioned Richard Branson, and he did a story that I actually read in the Delta magazine. I forget what it's called, and he said that his dyslexia almost killed him. And what happened was he was jumping out of an airplane, and it was new. He had just started doing this, and he pulled the wrong cord because of his dyslexia. Luckily, there was an instructor near, and so they helped correct it so they didn't die. But he considers dyslexia really his his superhuman strength, his superhero strength. But Neil was one of the first people that I met that really came out big having dyslexia and really owning it. And I also know that Dysnie has done a lot around the world to make sure that we all can experience the magic. I had mentioned off the air, but that my partner, Richard Streitz, is a former Dysnie Imagineer. He worked for Dysnie for 15 years and built many theme parks, and still, when he talks about Dysnie, he says, we. It's like, I think once you fall in love with Dysnie and you're a cast member, you're always a cast member. But so I really liked some of the creative disability inclusion efforts that Dysnie was making with here in the States and all over the world. But I also think that the reason why your work is so important, and people like you and the rest of us, all the stuff that we're all doing, is that sometimes when children are learning, and they realize they're different, and the way we're teaching does not really help them learn, then and sometimes often society turns it on them, and you're broken and you're bad. And, Neil, come on, you need to apply yourself and you need to do this. And I certainly was not diagnosed with either one of these things as a child. In the first place, girls were not being diagnosed. Boys weren't being, I'm much older. But at the same time, then we see only boys being diagnosed. So it's a very interesting progress, but it is unfortunate that still, when we're educating individuals with dyslexia, whether it's known or not known, and it's often not known, the person is attacked. Well, if you would apply yourself, and it's always you that's broken. And I think that's very damaging to society, because what we do know is that dyslexia, as you said very eloquently, Joan, dyslexics are very creative. They're very innovative. They think differently, which is what corporations and employers want. They want those innovators. And I do think it's important to note that 65% of all entrepreneurs have dyslexia. I mean, this is not a minority group. This is a large group of very talented individuals, and dyslexia is like everything else, it's on a range. So I do want to applaud you for saying, wait a minute, how can I make a difference? I mean, that's why we started Access Chat. How can we contribute? We're not paid anything. We have these wonderful supporters and stuff of our program, but we did it because we knew this is one way to bring the community, which is a gigantic community. If you look at the community of people with disabilities, and often, unfortunately, and we're working hard on this point, but this is often not a club that people want to join. I remember when my daughter was born, 4 months later, she was diagnosed with Down syndrome. And my first reaction was, my daughter does not have Down syndrome. No, she doesn't. So it's like one thing that we are trying to do, and then people like you, leaders like you making a difference, is making sure that we really, really can be proud of who we are and really be very honest about our lived experience so we can add value to society. And so I just really applaud all the work that you've done, all of the work that Dysnie has continued to do to make sure we all can have a magical experience. You know, we're guests, we're not customers. I love how Dysnie sticks to their brand and their theme of let's all have a magical experience. So I just wanted to turn it over to you. And I know Antonio has a question, so I will go on mute.
Joan, not that long ago, a friend of mine in Ireland who had a young kid was telling me a similar story of discovery that he had a kid with a disability and the lack of support. So even if what happened to you happened a few years ago, I guess, this is still something that is happening today, is not, and probably parents of children today at this hour are in this situation might realize, well, I don't know what to do. So what can we learn from your experience and from your journey for those who are suddenly in your situation right now?
Yeah, no, it's true that even if there's a lot of great buzz out there now, and there are interesting groups that have cropped up over the years, the books that talk about the strengths, and there are people, like us out there kind of pushing the good narrative. I mean, it's still a struggle. And I think it's going to take a generation before the schools sort of, get with the program, because it's not the problem, as Debra said, with the person. It's really the system that's not designed. It's not inclusive enough, right? And, if I look at the products that we just did with Dysnie as a side, I mean, those products are inclusive. If we made all books dyslexia friendly, we would make them inclusive and we wouldn't have to worry about that. So there's a lot of work to be done. So in the meantime, what I would say to parents is that you need to start picking up clues as to where your child is on the strength side. What areas do they really do well in? Are they good at Legos? Are they good at storytelling? And are they good at sports? Do they draw really well? I mean, these other sort of skills that they can clue you into their strengths, and then get them in these extracurriculars and get those skills developed, because that's going to help with their self-esteem. And, half the battle with dyslexia is self-esteem. And, you have people telling you that you can't, but, you know that you're really good here, and you can think in your mind, you think, I know I can, I don't feel stupid. Why am I not able to do this? So, it is a bit confusing, but if at least you can get them on the road to some areas that they're really excelling in, that's good. I think that you need to inform them as well about all of these great success stories, and in fact, that they're coming from all walks of life, all different disciplines, from writers to rocket scientists and people in the entertainment industry, working in corporations, like us. So it really, it doesn't, there's no limit whatsoever. And, what I really find exciting, it kind of touches on what Debra said, is that, dyslexics have those 21st century skills that corporations are seeking. I mean, there was an excellent report put out by Ernst & Young a couple of years ago that really outlines all of these and how they just really pair up with really the skill side or the strength side of dyslexia. So yeah, that's what I would say to parents. And support groups are good. And I would recommend that parents do what I did. Try to figure out how their companies could make their services and products dyslexia friendly, because in the end, you'll create awareness, and you will also probably get a support group off the ground. And an important thing to mention in all this is that dyslexia touches at least 1 out of 10. In the US, they talk about 1 out of 5. So that means that people need to know what dyslexia is at the end of the day. We need to tell everybody about it because there's the workforce that's impacted, employees, customers, etc. So, I would say think big about this.
And fully support that. I think that you talked about your management team and the number of senior managers that had come up to you after you talked and explained that they're dyslexic. Now, obviously, with invisible disabilities, it does take some courage to come and talk about this stuff, because we have this stigma around conditions where we were considered to be stupid or lazy or a dilettante or all of the above at various different points. And so, of course, if you're doing okay and you're finding ways to cope, you hide it. So what I'm interested to know is, because I'm passionate about this, and I believe that I've had to role model, and it was incumbent on me as someone in the space that I talk about it openly and always. But for a long time within my organization, I complained that I was the only, senior manager with a disability in the organization, and we know there are lots. So did you, after those talks, get people coming forward? Because we now have an SVP in the UK that actually said, actually, dyslexia is part of my success. It's the reason I'm successful. And again, having multiple senior managers start to talk about this is changing the culture. Has that been a result, one of the results of you going around and talking and starting this network?
I think it depends on the culture and where you're from in Europe. I think the Anglo-Saxon community is a little bit more open to being, to owning dyslexia and addressing the strength side, because we see so much talent and there's a lot spoken about it. I think the challenge that we have are in the non-English speaking markets, where the narrative, or the positive narrative, is not there. And yeah, exactly. And so, for example, in France, what I would love to see is that book Dyslexic Advantage translated into French, because I think there's that narrative that needs to get out there. You need to create these stepping stones in all of the non-English speaking markets that translate those books I referred to earlier on, to sort of open people's mind about that. Because the other thing that we haven't talked about yet is that dyslexia is hereditary. And, you often find that, that it does run in families, and it might skip generations, and it might be in an undiagnosed situation because, 40 years ago, this diagnosis wasn't happening, and so on and so forth. So, it's really important that people have this positive narrative. And I think that's the first step before coming out, so to speak. And in France, another thing that is not happening, that what's happening in the Anglo-Saxon world, is you have celebrities that have dyslexia. They're not necessarily coming out about it. So it's almost like we need to rally the talent, the celebrities in each market. And that's kind of like a private goal, or I should say not private, but it's a personal goal that I have. How can I round up the talent in France, where I live, to get them speaking? Because I think they will open the floodgates, and people will be happy to jump on the bandwagon in a more open and transparent way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because there are cultural differences, and different countries are at different points on that journey. But equally, it does take the person or people with a bit of courage to take that first leap and say, yeah, I'm successful, but I'm also dyslexic, and that I can do some things really, really well, and other things I struggle with, but that doesn't make me less of a person. And in fact, it's what actually shapes my attitude and my innovation. Because I know that when I was undiagnosed, that was a challenge, and so there were times when I was disruptive. I'm sure Debra was too, and that whilst I knew I was intelligent, I still failed at things, and so understanding of self, that self-forgiveness, is also important, and it gives you maybe the comfort to then, and courage to then come and talk about it. I also think that it's the more you do it, the less difficult it becomes.
Yeah.
So the first time I did it, it was uncomfortable. Now, you only have to Google me. It will come up. There is no secret.
But it takes
Well,
courage.
it's almost, Neil, it's almost like yeah, and I think that, it's great that, you are so vocal about that. And and I think we need other executives to come out, and there needs to be some sort of a community that dyslexic executives, let's say, for the lack of a better word, are part of, so that they can, there could be maybe profiles about them and encourage others, and then it just becomes a snowballing thing. I mean, there's so many things that need to happen to get people more comfortable about talking about it, but you're right, you need to start with the courage, somebody like yourself encouraging other people, finding well-known people as well to maybe get on the bandwagon and to be the godfather, the godmother of the movement in the given country. And but yeah, there needs to be something like that.
Just so you know, there is actually a group on LinkedIn called Neurodiverse Professionals. So that's one collective of people that are on a social network that are open about their neurodiversity. So that it may not just be dyslexia, they may be ADHD, they may have autistic spectrum condition, but it's a group of people that are professionals that are happy to talk about it and collaborate, and we need more of that. Because that role model behavior then cascades through the culture of the organization, and gives people that maybe haven't felt comfortable permission to be open.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe just to add to that, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I have a delay because it's snowing and ice here. Okay. So you go ahead, Joan, and then I'll comment.
Okay. I was just going to say to that point, Neil, because of those cultural differences, I mean, a company like yours or mine, who have offices all over the world, if you had a couple offices really being, gung-ho about speaking up and out about it, it could encourage the executives from the French office and the German office and the Italian office, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a certain power, I think, that the big corporations have. So even if culturally, like in France, there's always sort of a stigma about making spelling mistakes. There could be people that just do that because they're dyslexic, that people would dare speak up. But if you had somebody in another office, an executive that was willing to speak up, this could have a knockoff effect.
And I will also say, I don't think this is just for executives and leaders. We all need to come out and really embrace our lived experiences. And I know that it's harder in certain cultures that haven't really talked about this yet, but I think we should not just be encouraging leaders and executives to come out. We need to encourage everybody to be their true self. And I know that takes time and effort, but I also think that during this COVID-19, I know in the States, people with disabilities, especially people with hidden and invisible disabilities, have not wanted to disclose that they have these disabilities because they've been seen as negative. But what we've seen during the COVID-19 is more Americans self-identifying than ever before. And then there's these, I don't know what to think about this, but there's these weird things that are happening that I can always find something positive about any situation. It's almost obnoxious, but I was talking to somebody in the UK the other day, and they told me that they had a CEO of one of their client companies that came and said, will you give me a test for dyslexia because I want to be neurodiverse? So I thought, okay, that's weird. Wow. Okay. But so is being dyslexic or neurodiverse now the cool thing to be? I mean, you've got Greta Thunberg. I mean, you've got the famous Neil Milliken, you know what I mean? So it's like Richard Branson. But at the same time, even though that particular point was weird, I think people really need to come out and be who they are. And let's talk about our lived experiences, because as we all have been saying during the program, there is real value to the employers. If you're looking at it only from the lens of employment, retention, promotion, because it's great to hire somebody that's dyslexic, but you need to understand who they are. You need to accommodate them, make sure they can thrive and be innovative and creative, because what you'll do if you hire people with dyslexia and you ignore their true selves, you do not let them really be as innovative and creative as they could be. So I applaud companies like Atos that understand the value that Neil brings to the table and, you know, really allow him, you know, to once again bring his true self to the table. And I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, Joan, but then after you comment, then we can turn it over to Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. You know, talk about the executives, but of course it needs to trickle down. Everybody needs to feel comfortable. And I think it is a cultural thing too. I know in the UK, I had different levels coming to me and feeling rather confident about that, but I don't think that's the case in every market, but it needs to be across the board. And, you know, if we could, you know, the way I look at my initiative, and in any company for that matter, if we really were to leverage the dyslexics, imagine what we could come up with. You know, if we could put those dyslexics together in a think tank for the company to brainstorm about ideas and how to make the product services, you know, more exciting and easier. I mean, I think we can come up with great things. And it's not just the leaders at the top. And in fact, you know, what they say is that, you know, dyslexics tend to be in a position that's underperforming their abilities, right? So we need to unleash that. We need to really unleash that. And the first step, to your point, Debra, I think is for them to admit that they have this dyslexia. Then they have permission to make a mistake when they spell or be a slow reader or, you know, all of those other things that are outcomes of that.
So, Joan, looking at the workforce, looking at employment, you know, we have been talking about leaders, but sometimes, you know, our people in human resources, they are the one doing the interviews, they are the one writing the requirements for employment. How can, you know, let's say your son is growing, is in school, is in the education system, but there are many people out there that are applying for a job and they end up in this situation where the current system and the current process of human resources might become a kind of a gate for them that can stop them from getting a job. So how do you see this, and what are the steps that organizations need to take to make sure that they don't exclude people just because they have read an email or a CV and they realize, oh, this person doesn't qualify because there are some mistakes here. How do you say this?
Well, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I think this is also something that will take time at companies, but clearly I think policies need to be revisited. I think that first of all, they need to be informed. You know, what are these learning differences? What are the consequences of these? Where can we help them? And once people are enlightened about these things, they tend to look at these learning problems as, okay, you know, it's just like wearing glasses, right? I mean, thank God for glasses, right? All four of us wear glasses. If we didn't have glasses, we would not be able to read or do anything that well, right? So suddenly it's just normal. So I think it's the same thing, letting HR know about all of these things. And the other thing is make sure that the tools are in place for those individuals. So, I mean, I read recently that, you know, having a double screen, 2 screens for your computer is actually a good accommodation for some dyslexics. I didn't know that, but that should be, you know, just part of the toolkit. And in fact, if we come back to the whole inclusive thing, it should just be the toolkit they offer anybody, right? It's not just the dyslexic or the learning, you know, the person with the learning disability. It is actually every employee, and some might find that they need double screen regardless of they're dyslexic or not. So it's providing those tools. And, you know, and I think there's another thing that we really can do is that we can write into the policies for the employees of the dyslexics, certain things like time off, because as a parent of a dyslexic, I'm constantly having to deal with meetings and going to meet with specialists and this, that, and the other thing, which has been easy to do, relatively speaking, at my level because I had a team. But for people lower in the hierarchy, it's not that easy. So I think there's a lot that needs to happen in different spaces, and all of that together could lead to, you know, taking people on that, you know, okay, there's a spelling mistake, and maybe they're going to be less critical when they find out that actually could be as a result of dyslexia. Excellent.
I think we've pretty much hit the end of our allotted half an hour. It's been a great conversation. I fully agree that we need to do more to support individuals. By the way, I've got 3 monitors. It helps marvelously. Also want to thank the people that keep us on air. Barclays Access, Microlink, and MyClearText for helping us be captioned and inclusive. Thank you very much, Joan. It's been a real pleasure. We're looking forward to you joining us on Twitter on Tuesday. Debra disappeared. It's due to the snowstorm. Just cut her internet. So if people wonder why she went, it's not because she disliked our company. It's due to the flaky connection.
Well, it's been a pleasure on my end. Looking very forward to next Tuesday.